Violette mentioned that we've got a terrible acronym. I disagree because it lets me have a terrible pun here at the start. So this is a postcard from research near and far. So, so really, we've heard already some of the reasons why people are excited about the NEAR program. What I wanted to do today was to dive into some of the nitty-gritty about what we've been doing, why we think that's valuable, and what's coming down the pipeline. But before we do that, I really wanted to give an overview of why I think this matters and why I think it's a really important piece of work. So, unfortunately, most people that know me know that I have this strange addiction with starting all of these presentations with a really profoundly overwrought analogy. So let's try this on for size. So, recently, I was lucky enough to go to Venice, really romantic, wonderful place. And I guess the thing that Venice is most famous for is the canals. So I don't do a huge amount of travel, so for me this was the one chance in my life to actually go and physically touch the canal. I can forever say that I'm someone that's been to Venice and I've touched those waters that have flowed there for so long. And it came to the last night. This is my chance. I found a dark alley to go down, to sneak down to get towards the canal, and this is the consequence of that. So difficult to tell, but that is an entirely drenched atom. It looks roughly like a normal atom, but a little more embarrassed. And for me, this was a metaphor for our data sector. So if you make decisions in the dark, you are bound to make some really bad decisions. So what you might not be able to see is around here, I'm actually pouring blood out of my leg. It turns out Venice is beautiful, the canals are wonderful, but they're lined with barnacles. So if in the dark you fall into a canal and then desperately scramble your way out, please be aware that there are barnacles there that will cause damage. So Rosemary mentioned earlier that data can be sunshine. And I think there's a real danger with operating in darkness. So we're bound to make bad decisions. We're going to rely on historical trends and rules of thumb if we don't have a solid evidence base. And for me, the thing that makes the NEAR program exciting is that we're going to directly tackle that, bringing better data and better research into the sector. So that's a silly story, but I want to emphasise that this is something that genuinely matters. So here at a system level, this is what happened across the national electricity market in terms of energy consumption after 2017. So relatively flat, a little bit of tapering there. If we stretch back a long way, you would have seen basically a linear rise in that energy consumption. Now, in 2009, 2010, there was a forecast released as to what was going to happen in the energy sector. So that was the forecast. That's a miss of 44 terawatt hours, which is about 23% off. Now, that 23% is not just a numerical point of interest. It is something that genuinely impacts billions of dollars of investment in the energy sector. So the reason we're getting that wrong is not because people don't know how to forecast, right? We know how to forecast. A lot of us have done linear regressions. We can work all that sort of stuff out. The problem is that there is a massive amount of change happening in the sector that we don't have great insight into. So in 2009, 2010, we're getting rapid uptake of PV. We're getting gas and electricity prices fluctuating. There was the global financial crisis. All of these things happening at the same time. And a real profound lack of data on really pretty much all of that stuff. And to give you a sense, the data quality over that time hasn't helped us a huge amount. So our forecasts since then have gotten a little bit better, but not a lot better. So getting better data, getting better research really makes a profound impact. But I don't want to just hover around the system impacts. There's an impact at the personal level as well. So if we look at what NCOS had to say about the cost of living in New South Wales, they interviewed a bunch of people that were doing it tough, were essentially struggling. And when I read this, I found this amazing. So 19 to 25% of respondents sometimes go without medical treatment and medication in order to pay their energy bills. So that's a profound sacrifice that people are making just about to keep the lights on. 22% go without a substantial daily meal in order to pay their energy bills. So I'm lucky that doesn't impact me, but there is a profound number of people out there that it does. So when we talk about tariffs and cost-reflective pricing and how do we deliver the right kinds of economic signals, if we don't know those customers really well, we're going to get it really wrong. And that is a profound issue. If I'm giving up medication in order to keep the lights on, then Australia is doing something profoundly wrong. Last point is we're seeing these sorts of electricity behaviours. So this is a piece of work from AEMO as part of their Future Power System Security Program. And that's a pretty complicated load signal, right? So they're just 10 randomly selected customers. That sort of variability is something that's happening increasingly more as we head into the future. So in the past, it was all pretty easy. We were pretty predictable people. Generation was pretty predictable. All of a sudden, massive air conditioning load, heaps of PV, and by the way, electric vehicles are coming and storage is coming. So AEMO said if their uptake is not holistically managed, distributed energy resources in aggregate can have a material and unpredictable impact on the power systems and its dynamics due to their cumulative size and changing characteristics. So again, if we don't understand what's happening at that customer level in terms of their load behaviour, then how are we ever going to get those operational forecasts right? So much is moving in the system. We can't rely on rules of thumb and historical data anymore. All right. So the NEAR program really is an approach to trying to address that. And it's something that I love because I can describe it in 3 simple circles. So first circle is data acquisition. So there's a whole bunch of data out there held by a whole bunch of different organisations that we can bring together and unify. There are still going to be gaps, and part of the data acquisition process is us going out and collecting brand new primary data, so conducting things like surveying and the like. Once we have that data, it really is just a bunch of zeros and ones, and frankly, reasonably difficult to interpret and make value out of. So on top of that, we layer data research so that we can deliver genuine insight about issues that affect us right now and that will affect us into the future. And then, and for me, the most important part, and it's the reason I've drawn the circle biggest, is this data sharing piece. So we're a publish first, open approach to data, the NEAR program. And the key here is that I'm not arrogant enough to think that our team can deliver all of the answers. So we want it to be transparent. The research we do, it will be out there. You can get it, download it, extend it. The data that we're bringing together will make that available as well. So we're hoping that this becomes a platform that others can leverage and to really grow into something pretty amazing. All right, so that's the pitch. But frankly, I don't trust pitches unless I see something that looks a bit like a chart or something kind of tangible and concrete. So let's have a look at some of that. So let's start by looking at the householders. So just who is the modern Australian energy consumer? So one of the ways that we look at that is we conduct surveying. And our approach to surveying is really trying to bring together all of the factors that we think are relevant to energy consumption behaviour. So a mix of appliance use, building characteristics, energy consumption, and household demographics. We pull all of that data together across surveying. The initial round of surveying that we've conducted was delivered primarily in Victoria and Western Australia, so that was a pilot round. Survey sent to more than 50,000 households, responses around 4,000, a little more than 4,000. And that data enables us to start diving into, okay, what is the connection between behaviour and the demographics and characteristics of a household? Once we've done that, this is going to be difficult to read, so I'll probably talk you through it a little bit. So we looked at, we've got a whole bunch of information that describes households. We've got load data from those households. We can start to look at what happens if those households are on different types of tariffs. So Rosemary mentioned vulnerability. Let's have a look here at what happens with vulnerable versus other households. For vulnerable households here, we're talking about people that really don't have the levers available to them to directly address bill shock. So they're low-income households. They are households that are renters and in apartments, they're older households. So if you look just at this chart and you don't think about anything else, there are a couple of stories. One of them is that the choice of tariff makes really very little difference to the total annual cost that those households are exposed to. So the idea that the different tariff structures being offered are materially impacting us and giving us a unique opportunity to change our behaviour and make amazing savings just doesn't appear to be the case. The other point there is, well, it looks like vulnerable consumers are paying less than non-vulnerable consumers, so that's a good news story, right? Data is a dangerous thing, so you've got to interpret it carefully. So if you actually dive into the estimated bill as a fraction of household income, all of a sudden we can see vulnerable consumers are paying between 8 and 9%, often up to 13% of their household income on energy bills. That's a massive amount. That's part of the reason why we're seeing people going without medicine and going out without their meals. What's important from a near program perspective here is that this sort of data, it's publicly available. You can go and download it, look at it today. This is an interactive visualization, so you can look at other segments. So there's low income segments, there's low consumers versus high consumers. All of this is available online today. A key part of this work actually contributed to the ACCC inquiry into energy supply and prices. All right, but what's nice is that because we have a wealth of data here, we can dive in deeper. This chart really shows, again, it's interactive. You can go and play with this online, hopefully after I'm done talking. But the idea here is that we can see what the key contributors are to energy consumption by season. And we can look, okay, what would happen if I went from a household that had no gas heating to one that has gas heating? What's going to happen in terms of my total annual energy consumption, and how does that change by season? So again, this gives us deeper insight into what's driving consumer behaviour and what changes might make the most impact. And then finally, we can link all of this up to understand what is the really fine-grained, minute-to-minute behaviour of consumers. So we saw before all of those spiky curves that AMO were looking at. If we cluster, which is just basically bring together groups of similar households according to their load behaviour, then all of a sudden we can start to see what typical consumers look like and how they behave. So let's look at that. Again, a little difficult to see on the slide, but this is one group of households that have similar behaviour across the course of the year, and each of those curves shows behaviour on typical days. So if we dive in here, the colour coding represents a season. So we can see this particular consumer, they use heaps of energy during winter. It's in Victoria, so it's not surprising. And you can see that there are some differences in behaviour even within winter. Because we've got location, we can link that up with temperature data as well, and we can see the way behaviour changes on mild summer days versus really hot summer days. So if we dive in here with my pointer, apologies to people on the other side of the room, this pink line here, that is during a peak summer day, and this browner line here is during a mild summer day. So you're seeing the dramatic changes that happen based just on temperature. And then if you wanted to go further still, you could actually look at a calendar and say, okay, well, when are these behaviours happening? And you can actually start to see fun things like on the Anzac Day weekend, behaviour changes in a fairly profound way. So again, heaps of information here, a wonderful A3, impossible to carry around slide deck is out there for you to look in deeper detail. And then we can compare them across different household groups. And what's exciting is if we can link this up, and this is work that's happening right now, with customer demographics, then we can start to say, okay, this is a low-income consumer group. So here's what's going to happen if we've got different tariffs. Here's what's going to happen if we try and have automated load control. All right, so that's meant to be a crystal ball. so let's look at the forecasting question. So for me, the key to getting better forecasting is twofold. One is better data, The other is making that data more specific to finer grained regions. So it is really difficult to do forecasting at a state or a national level. There's just too much variability going on. That variability is driven by demographic characteristics, by local weather, by where PV is taken up and where it's not, where there are government incentives, where there's not. So we need to get in much closer to the consumer to be able to do better forecasting. Good news is, this is the result of a huge amount of work. All of those coloured polygons there, they're areas where we have up to a decade of half-hourly energy consumption data, all in a completely unified format, all linked up with ABS characteristics, land use characteristics, weather data from the BOM. So all of a sudden we've gone from, look, you know, we've got a general sense of what's happening to state level to really specific, really well-described energy consumption data that stretches for years and years. Once we've got that, we can do any type of aggregation we want. So here's a piece of work that we did for the Bureau of Infrastructure that now contributes to estimates around city-based emissions. And this looks at, okay, how much energy consumption per capita is there in 20 different key cities across Australia? So in the past, that's really difficult to do because all of our data was at a high level. Here, we've got the capacity to drill in and actually describe in a really detailed way city-based behaviour. So with all of this information, with demographics and land use, building characteristics, weather, energy consumption, we can start doing actual forecasting work. So here is really preliminary piece of work, but looking at if we throw all of those things at a neural network, which is what data scientists love to do, how well can we predict, based just on the land use of an area, what the median energy consumption of that area is going to be? If we get that perfectly right, it will be a perfect diagonal line from 0, 0 all the way up to 50, 50. So just diagonal line, and this is the result. So this is for thousands of zone substations, and you can see we're getting it pretty darn close. And this is preliminary work. So the amount of accuracy that we can get from forecasting by bringing these things together is pretty darn profound. Okay, so earlier we talked about issues around PV and air conditioning making load really complicated. And part of the reason that it is complicated is that we don't have great data sources. So in most places outside of New South Wales in particular, we only have net PV. So that obscures both the load and the actual PV output. And we have really essentially no insight at all into what's going on with air conditioners, aside from the fact when it's really hot, people turn them on. So can we do better? So earlier I was talking about the zone substation loads. This is a bit what it looks like for a day, right? Kind of helpful. It tells us the peaks in the afternoon. There's a little mini peak in the morning, but doesn't tell us a lot for things like if we want to run a demand response program, how much can we carve out of that second peak? It doesn't tell us things like how much of this is actually PV, gross PV, that's hiding underlying load. And that really matters because if all of a sudden a cloud passes overhead and you get a 10 gigawatt increase in energy requirement, then you need to be able to respond to that. So my dream is to be able to do something like this. So pull out from that, here's the cooling load, here's the heating load. It would also be nice if we could learn about the characteristics of the air conditioning systems in each of those regions that we're looking at. And ultimately, it'd be great if we could extend this and work out what the gross PV is operating at that zone substation level. So this is a bit of a trust me slide. So the blue shading is what we said would happen based on air conditioning load, and the black dots are what actually happened. So we have a system here that actually helps us understand at a regional level, half-hour to half-hour basis, up to a decade, historically what's been happening with air conditioning. And we can do the same thing for gross PV. Excitingly, we've done that for this many areas. So that is a massive amount of data that stretches back through time that tells us about the way we as a people are using air conditioning systems and the way gross PV is actually being pushed out. But I'm also interested in understanding the actual specific individual household customer experience. So those paper-based surveys we saw before, they're wonderful for asking long-form, slow-moving questions. If you want to know what's happening in someone's house when it's 40 degrees, you need a different way to engage with them directly. So we've developed something called CSIRO Energize, basically a mobile surveying app. So we have a panel of around 4,000 registered users where we can push surveys right now on any topic and get quick responses back. So we did that at 2 different dates recently, one in mid-January. The real takeaway from this map is you did not want to be in Sydney mid-January, so this was an extreme heat wave. In mid-February, you're probably a little bit happier because the heat wave had moved on. So we sent surveys to these people asking, okay, what are you doing with your air conditioning? How comfortable are you? Are you running fans? Those sorts of questions, so that we can actually tie up the sort of information we saw before with what's happening inside the home. And here are just a couple of really quick snapshots of some of the things that we see. So on the right-hand side, survey 2, what we're seeing there is a typical mild summer day. You get about half the people using air conditioning systems. When we go to heat wave conditions, all of a sudden 82.8% of people are using air conditioners. Now, that's roughly a doubling of electrical load based just on temperature. More than that, we're seeing not just more people using them, but using them for longer. So it's around, a third of consumers on that heatwave day use their air conditioner for more than 7 hours. Compare that on a mild day, you're more like 10 to 15% use it for more than 7 hours. So again, really dramatic change in behaviour, dramatic change in the load profile. And if we dived in deeper still, we actually see that people run their air conditioners at lower set points as well on those really hot days. So using it more, using it longer, using it in a more energy intensive way. So these are profound changes in the total load profile of the energy sector. All right, so I've been threatened there's a giant stop sign over there. So really, I'll just do a really quick wrap up of some of the other things we don't have time to talk about. So look at this. I'll just flash random pretty charts at you and say, you can look at those pretty charts, and now they're gone. I guess I just wanted to point out, so there are 9 interactive dashboards. So if any of what I've spoken about today seems like it's of interest to you, jump onto the NEAR website. You can play with them today. And I want to make it clear, they're interactive dashboards, but the data sitting behind it is really strong, and the insights there are important. So please do look at them. If I've got some darker shading under my eyes, it's probably because in this last week alone, there have been 40 plus new research assets that we've released. So again, publicly available. We're transparent about the way we do our work. We share it. We want people to build on this. We want people to come and ask us questions about it. And our other role is bringing together data assets from across the sector and cataloguing them and making them easier to find. So we've got more than 100 of those assets, hand curated, people sitting there reading them, understanding them, cataloguing them, so that you can jump on our website, do a search for something like vulnerable consumers, and get information coming back to you. The thing I'm excited about is it's a free website, it's available to everyone, and it's online now. So my presentation is coming to an end, so you can start playing on your phones accordingly. I guess in terms of the road ahead, there's quite a few pieces of work that we're looking to expand into. So you'll notice a lot of what I spoke about there is around electricity use, and it's around residential consumers. Increasingly, our work will expand to include gas use, commercial and industrial uses. Probably the key driver of energy change across the next decade will be the uptake of battery storage and electric vehicle systems. And we work really closely with AEMO to be able to understand where that's happening at the moment, to automatically identify them. And in the future, we'll be looking at how do we identify what typical profiles happen as a result of the installation of these systems. We work with the Department of the Environment and Energy on national reporting, such as Energy Statistics Australia, and in trying to improve the robustness of our reporting with those systems. And then lucky last, the holy grail for me is producing better forecasts at every level of granularity. So both temporally and spatially. So can we do better in both short and long-term forecasting from individual household all the way up to nation? That sounded like I was done, didn't it? I'm not. So, so this is the last slide. So the most important thing for me is that these programs only work with input from all of the people in this room. Maybe not all of you, like let's say half. So genuinely, if there are research areas that you think are priority, that are causing you issues in your business or that you think are impacting consumers, we need to hear them. In exchange for that very generous offer, these programs only work if we have data to work with. So to the extent that your organisation has data that you think is valuable and that could connect in with the existing data and research that we have, please let us know. Now I actually am done. Okay, thank you.